Okay guys, I'm just going to start by just a couple of statements. We're really hoping that over the next couple of hours you find the session not only interesting and enjoyable, but also informative. And we really want it to be a two-way experience, an interactive event really, which will allow us to get as much information from you as you get from us. Thank you very much as well to everyone who's here today. We appreciate that it's been, taking 3 hours out of your really busy schedules is a big deal. And I'd also like to thank all of the networks and practices who have put themselves forward to be part of the Exemplar programme. So thanks very much. In terms of who I am, I'm a GP for the most part, just down the road here in Garstang. I work nearly full time. But I'm here in my capacity as a primary care clinical lead for digital health for the Lancashire and South Cumbria STP. In terms of my own background experience in digital innovation, that's really largely centred around my work as clinical lead for the Morecambe Bay Advice and Guidance System, which has now been in place for the last 4 years. That's more around the kind of primary secondary care interface than looking at primary care. So I'm going to take some time in a few moments just to give you my take on what the Digital Exemplar programme is all about. However, first I thought it would be really useful to do a little bit of a who's who in the room. So first of all, could I ask all of the Exemplar team from Redmore to stand up if possible, please? So we've got Mark, Lisa, Paula, Mike and Richard. All about. Just give us all a wave so we can all see who you are. We're really lucky to have Mark and his team on board with this project. They're going to be working in the capacity of overseeing and managing the whole project, but also working really closely with all the Exemplar networks and practices on the ground. They bring with them a great variety of skills and experience and are really perfect for the role. I thought it'd be useful just to do a bit of a straw poll today to see who we've got in the room. So can I ask all clinicians if they could raise their hands? Brilliant, it's good to have a number of clinicians here. What I'd say, guys, is that it's your role in the Exemplar programme. I can't emphasise how important it is as key influencers at your practice level in terms of change or changing culture. Can I ask now for people who are either working administratively or in a management role to stand up for me, please? Just raise your hand. Brilliant. Okay, so we've got an awful lot of you. Again, your role is really, really important in this. Not only in terms of inspiring, but also supporting your colleagues at ground level throughout the process. So, the only other thing is to get an idea of geography. So could I ask anyone from West Lancs to raise their hand? Okay, we thought that might be the case because we believe there's another big event going on in West Lancs. How about East Lancs? Brilliant, thanks for coming on board. Fylde Coast, so Fylde and Wyre. Brilliant. Morecambe Bay? Yeah. And last of all, Central Lancs? That's brilliant. Okay. So what's my take on the Exemplar programme? Well, first and foremost, for me, it is about providing a package of support to practices and networks to facilitate innovation on the front line, to support practices and networks in trying ways of being digitally smarter, essentially. And when we think about sort of innovation, at GP practice level, it's not a new concept, is it? I mean, it's something that we're probably already experts in. Sort of as running small businesses over the last couple of decades with all the changes in the NHS, we've become experts in innovating from the front line already. What I would say about innovation in this context is that we're not just talking about innovation for improving our patients' experience. Yes, that is all really important, but equally as important in my mind is about innovating to improve practice resilience. we live in a really challenging time in primary care, and I believe that actually by using digital solutions in a smart way, we can improve our efficiencies, not only in terms of the way we interact with our patients, but also in terms of the processes within the practice or the network. Secondly, it's about being flexible, isn't it? What do I mean by that? Well, what I mean is listening to the practices involved. So we're not here to give a top-down approach dictating that you should or shouldn't do this, that or the other. What it's about for us is actually listening to practices. We're about acknowledging that each practice or network will actually have different ideas about what their priorities are to get out of the programme, and then adapting and supporting and tailoring that support accordingly. We're also about acknowledging that different practices and networks are actually at different stages of the journey along the road to digital maturity. So again, it's about tailoring the support we offer according to those needs. Furthermore, we acknowledge that practices and networks also may feel comfortable at going at a certain pace. So again, it's about adapting the support that we offer. Last of all, I think it's worth commenting that it's also about acknowledging the fantastic work that's already going on from our respective CCGs and the IT work streams, and working hard to complement that rather than conflict with it. Thirdly, it's about sharing. What do I mean about that? Well, it's really about instilling a culture within the programme whereby we're sharing the good ideas that we have, not just in terms of sharing between the exemplar practices, but also beyond that. So towards the end of the programme, what's worked well, what are our successes, how are we going to share those with the wider primary care community? We'll be spending a little bit of time in an hour or so in the tabletop groups looking at this issue about how we actually can facilitate sharing and networking between us throughout the programme. We'll also be taking some time to look at how are we going to evaluate our successes, how are we going to say what's worked well and how are we going to measure that. I'm just about to hand over to Mark, who's going to give you a bit of a run through about the plan for the day and introduce our first guest speaker. But I thought I'd just give a quick plug really in terms of making a start on how we start networking and sharing. So what we've done is we've set up a private closed Facebook group, which I mean, you can either take down the link here, but it's also in the invitation that you received yesterday. For people who don't like the idea of Facebook, we are looking at other strategies, maybe using WhatsApp or other media systems really in terms of finding ways that we can share. Also feel free to tweet if you like during the course of the afternoon, things that you find interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Mark here.
So thanks everybody for coming. It's a great turnout, and I think what we wanted to do with this was to give you a taste of some of the either some of the bits of software that are doing the rounds at the moment, give you an update which Kieran will be doing on iPlato, which was the online consultation, successful tender exercise we undertook, and also just to get an idea of an early indication of some good practice. So we've got one of the practices, Luann's going to be talking about how they use Facebook for PPGs as well, which should be of interest to you. So what we're going to do, we've got about 4 presentations which we'll go through. What we'll do is probably keep questions to the very end would be quite useful. And then we've got a break and we go into some roundtable discussions and that as well, which my colleague Mike will just give an overview of that as well. So without further ado, I'll first introduce Kay Rinnick from the NHS England Patient Online team. We'll give a kind of an overview, setting the scene around the online programme as well.
That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah. So do I need to just click down?
Yeah, just that cursor there, yeah.
Right.
If you need any help.
Yeah, no worries.
Right, hello everybody, I'm Kay Rinnick from NHS England.
We were a patient online team, but that is no more. We're not a programme anymore in relation to patient online. We've been split, so we've had a big reorganisation. So as an implementation lead, I'm now part of the Empower the Person team. And the patient online is still very much part of that, but there's also lots of other things that are incorporated into that as well, like online consultations, NHS 111, and online consultations is another as well. And it's about, and GP Wi-Fi is another one as well. So it's just about how we now sort of align with all those other offers in relation to digital offers and things like that. We do have half of the team who went into the other pillar, if you like, and that's supporting and digitising the clinician. And that will be our clinicians who we still work with and will still have a lot of sort of involvement with and who will still help us. But it'll also be our engagement and support team as well, one of whom's here today and who's manning the stand with me out there, so please come and speak to us in the break if you need to. So that's just a little bit overview really of what's happened with the programme, because it isn't a patient online programme anymore, it's very bigger. So really, I'm aware that, you know, a lot of the practices in the room now are probably, you know, are very proactive in relation to patient online, but I think, you know, there's still a lot of myths out there about, you know, people who are older don't use the internet, or don't, you know, there's lots of people who still don't, but actually 90% of adults now have access to the internet, and 80% of those adults access the internet on a daily basis. So that actually could be used like a smartphone or anything like that. Interestingly, 1 in 4 users are over the age of 55, so absolutely, you know, the older generation are using online services a lot more now. So what I want to just go through today is a few myths, because there's a lot of confusion over ID verification in relation to patient online. And we still hear of practices who insist on having photographic evidence before they register patients for online services. And that is a big barrier. That's providing, you know, that's actually, you know, our patients are finding they're having to go away and come back with ID, and a lot of the times they don't. There's 3 approved methods. Yes, sorry, it's because I need to click. I haven't got a clicker, so sorry. Yeah, sorry for that. So one of the ways of ID verification is vouching, and I think a lot of you might use that, and that's just by, you know, your members of staff within your practices being able to vouch to say that person standing in front of you is the patient. And for those, you know, staff who've been in your practices for years, that's often very, very easy to do. And there's also vouching by confirmation of what's in the record. So you could ask the patient stand in front of you a few questions, not just demographics. Ask questions around maybe when did you know, what was your last operation for, what were you last prescribed, what was your last acute medication. Ask them those types of questions to be able to confirm their ID that way. And a lot of these patients as well who might ask for it are coming to see nurses maybe regularly. And the nurse is clearly carrying out a treatment on that patient, and not going to do that unless they're quite confident that the person presenting as a patient. Again, use that sort of resource as well to be able to vouch for those IDs. We do say though, for access to records, we do actually would always advocate maybe having a look at some documentation in relation to the access to record side. That's more for the transactional services side. So just very quickly, as I say, I just wanted to go through that. Children and young person, again, it is acceptable to allow children to have access. Obviously, there's issues around competency and things like that. Competency have to be assessed from the age of 11. If they're not competent to manage their own record, the proxy may continue to have access at that point. If they are competent to manage their own record, I must admit not many children age 11 will be competent, but that is what the guidelines are. Then obviously the child can have access to be able to order their repeat meds and things like that. Again, there's lots of information around children and young persons on the RCGP website, and we have a video that's on there, like e-learning, and that's only about 10 minutes long, so it doesn't take a long time to sort of go through it, as we have for the ID vouching as well. So really what you need to know about online access for children and young persons. Think about your clinical system and learn what the configuration cut-off times are. Depends upon your clinical system, what the cut-off times are. EMIS practices, I think, are you all EMIS practices? Yeah. So EMIS, at the moment, you'll be going through some system upgrades, so that will change. So it will change very much what's happening around the age cut-off and things like that. But if you want to talk to us separately about that, I can do in the break time. So milestones to be aware of, obviously under 11s, getting up to that 11, and then 11 to 16, that's when you've got to obviously, you know, sort of monitor the competency of that child during that period, because just because they're not competent at 11 doesn't mean to say they won't still be competent at 15, 16, etc. And then 16 plus. There's obviously potential benefits there, particularly around new clients, new patients, and new parents. So think about the young children sort of vaccination programs when parents are bringing their kids in, you know, for the baby IMS and things like that. Try to capture and use that as an opportunity to capture new sort of online users at that point. And obviously children and young persons with long-term conditions as well. So these are our promotional materials. We've got a few out there just to sort of show you. They're all available free of charge. Do you all have these in your practice, the blue and yellow ones? Right, these were introduced, I think, well over a year ago now. And they can be ordered free of charge from the DOH order line. You're all limited to what you can order, but you can order it on a monthly basis. And just a little tip, I know I'm really not supposed to say this, the system is now intelligent enough to work out that your practice hasn't ordered their full quota, so you can have 3 people in a practice ordering because it's based on username rather than practice. Okay, so just a little tip for the bigger practices, makes it easier than phoning up and asking for more supplies. And there are our resources. So you've got the NHS England patient online page and the RCGP learning page, which I referred to earlier on today, is on the right hand side with all the e-learning modules for your staff and for yourselves as well to do. So obviously NHS Wi-Fi, I did touch on that earlier on. We've got practices now who is benefiting from the NHS Wi-Fi, who are advising their patients to download the patient access app, for example, whilst they're in reception, and helping the patients register for online services while they're actually in practice now. So that's just something that is just a little bit more there for the patients and be able to help them to register and increase your registrations. Now, we do have a commitment that the Secretary of State's made, and he wants to increase usage of appointments and availability of appointments. Obviously, with the onset of online consultations, we know that a lot of practices probably don't want to offer GP appointments online because you're circumnavigating the online consultation, and that's absolutely not. We fully acknowledge that. So it's about looking at what you can increase and looking at what you can expand on. And one of those areas is nursing appointments. Now, as an AIMS practice, you can offer quite a lot of nursing appointments online. That's very obvious to the patient, the type of appointment it is. Does anybody offer online nursing appointments at all? Yeah, and it works all right? You don't have any problems? Right. Which ones have you got on? That's on one of my slides actually, so we'll have a bit chat about that as well. That's great. So this is the GP Online Services contract for this year. In the GMS contract, practices under 10% are to work with NHS England to achieve greater use of online services. NHS England in this respect is the commissioner, because it's always NHS England when mentioned in the contract is the commissioner. So it could actually be the CCGs depending upon delegated budget and things like that. And there's a joint commitment to aim for 30% now with your registered patient with online services. Practices who have patients registered for and using online services are now seeing real benefits from this, and it's about the offer. I could go into my practice who does no triage, no online consultation, and I could go on and there will be no GP appointments for me to book on my app. I'll ring the practice and they'll say, yes, Kate, come in on Friday morning and we'll book, and you know, you can see such and such GP. Why couldn't I book that on the app? Why couldn't I book that online? So it's about thinking about it's equal access. So you're not removing those online access appointments for those people who are ringing, you're making it equal. So everybody, regardless of the access channel, could book in at 9 o'clock on Friday morning, and now available appointment, basically. Right, I'll just click down there. So there's all sorts of types of appointments. I'm not going to go through them. Some are untimed appointments, some of them face-to-face, some of them telephone triage appointments. I'm not going to go through them all now, but we will circulate this information. It's not something that we've developed ourselves, sitting in an office in the middle of in London somewhere. It is something, and when we visited the practices, this is the information that was gleaned from all the practices, you know, right throughout the region. So these are the common queries about patients booking into appointment slots. Is the patient booking into incorrect slots? Mixed clinics, so you think, well, I can't put a SME appointment on, for example, on a Friday morning because the nurse just doesn't deal with that. Different time slots depend upon need. GP appointments are triage, the use of care navigation. Obviously, you don't want to put the actual GP appointments on for the patients to circumnavigate, which I mentioned earlier on. And obviously being aware of your system variations around that as well. But just a few helpful hints and tips. Appropriate use of the free text screen. I know it's very limited with EMIS, but you can actually, you know, if you consider using just what characters you've got quite intelligently, try to direct your patients. Allow patients to book more than 1 or 2 future appointments in your config. I've got an example of that in a slide that I'll just discuss later. And configure individual patient online permissions to prevent misuse of appointment bookings. And that is, if you do, a lot of practices will say to me, I don't want to increase my config for my patients to book 1 or 2 because they'll abuse it and they'll start booking lots of appointments that they don't need. When I show you this scenario later on, you'll appreciate why that might be needed. And if you do have patients who's going to abuse it, take the appointment setting away from them. Obviously warn them first, but actually remove that from them. If they don't let 1 or 2 patients spoil it for the rest of your patient group, you know, absolutely do that. And DNAs, promote online services for DNA. It doesn't matter if your appointment's being made online, if it's being sort of released for online, it doesn't make any difference. The patient will still see that appointment to cancel. So I have a nursing appointment a week on Monday. My practice doesn't put nursing appointments online at all. So they've had to book it for me. I can actually go in and cancel that and see that appointment and I can do that. So it does reduce your DNAs. So I'll just show you a few scenarios here. And it's the nursing appointments. I'll just put that all up and then. Right, so it's a long-term condition patient. And this is based on your config, on your number of appointments that you've enabled. So the appointment is not able to book online, therefore reception staff have made the booking. It's a 20-minute appointment made up of 2 consecutive 10 minutes, so that's 2 appointments basically that patient's got. The patient wishes to book to see a GP for that week, but is unable to do so because the config's only set to 2 appointments. Because of that, even though it wasn't enabled for online and even though it wasn't made online, that patient cannot see or cannot make a GP appointment that week or another nursing appointment if he chooses to do so. So it is actually preventing patients from using it. You know, when you think about EMAS config settings. So it's about thinking what would actually work better for your practice. So amend the configuration within the clinical system and that will help. The other one is the nursing appointments, and this is DNA. And actually, this is a real life sort of scenario. This has actually happened. So we've got a 21-year-old with an asthma review appointment on Friday. She realises at 9 o'clock on Thursday night that she cannot attend because of additional work commitments. So without online access, she would have rang the practice at 8 o'clock on the Friday morning. She would have been in a long queue, and she would rather do her hair and do her makeup, and she puts the phone down and thinks, I'm not going to hang on, so it's a DNA. With online access, she literally goes into her patient access and she cancels it. Unfortunately, because the practice doesn't offer online, she can't rebook it, but at least she's been able to sort of cancel that appointment, and it makes it available for other people. So this one for me is probably one of the bigger ones, and this is like your cough point and your cost, and obviously saving lives as well. So we've got a 52-year-old female, and this is a real life scenario as well. Works long hours, requires a SME test, and they don't have the opportunity to book during the day because it's just completely overlooked. They remember it's 10 o'clock at night, but it's too late because that particular practice doesn't have those appointments online. So what we're saying is try to enable the appointments. It would be interesting to know what your cough return was, because I was talking with practice in Liverpool who've done this for the last year, and their QOF return was 82% for this, which is 2% above what you need for 100% QOF points, and in mine it's above the national average. So it's just, you know, thoughts around that. We already know that offering those appointments online works really well. And obviously the risk is that the patient's not identified for early diagnosis as well. So it could result, you know, in a life-threatening sort of situation for that particular patient. There was nearly 68 million of unclaimed QOF money in 16-17. I don't know what the results are for 17-18, it hasn't been published yet. Not all of it was related to appointments, but a lot of it is sort of related to where patients haven't necessarily turned up for appointments or where our information hasn't been gleaned to be able to input into your system for that to be collated. So just food for thought. So do you think sort of putting that type of appointment online would help a lot of practices? Do you think that is something that you think actually I could actually do that? Obviously you need to promote it, you've got to offer it so your patients are aware it's there. But clearly it's working, you know, for you. It's working for a practice that I've just spoken to in the Liverpool area. As I say, she sent me the QOF return, that was the snapshot of that QOF, and it was 82% that they actually got, which is, I think, what's the national average? About 67, is it 60? Something like that. So it's extremely low. So that's, you know, massive compared to that. And getting started. I'm not going to go over and over this, I'm aware that we're a bit pushed for time. I will send this out, but it's all around system config, just what I've been talking about. Think about the numbers of appointments you've got. Think about what you call, if you actually offer a smear, because EMIS practices can actually show the patient what that button is, if you like, so that the patient will see smear, they'll click into smear, it'll take them to the right clinician to the right time scale. Think about what you call that. Phlebotomy, for instance, a patient will not know what phlebotomy means properly, so think blood test. Ask your PPG group what's the best sort of title, if you like, to call it so your patients will use it correctly. And I do know our senior clinician who was on the patient online programme did have one guy who booked in for a smear last year. He only booked in once, he didn't book in anymore. And that's actually true. So this is just really around switching the process. At the minute when a patient rings, long-term condition patient, is a practice what you would do, what your reception staff would do to make sure that that patient is right for that type of appointment, and they would sort of check the record first. All you're doing by putting some of the nursing appointments online is maybe just checking at the end. And because patients will get used to doing that, you'll find less and less checking will have to be done, and the patients are booking in correctly and into the right slots. So, getting started again, if you're a little bit worried about it, just think about maybe offering an hour a day worth of sessions, and then build it up and see how that goes. Start with the appointment type that will work better for you in the practice. I know I've used a couple of examples, but you might think actually, I was in Doncaster, for example, and they said they would prefer to start with health checks, and they think the NHS health checks would be better to start online. It's got to work for you as a practice. Think about what will work better for you first. Obviously, monitor your free appointments, because your staff can still override those appointments, even if they've been sort of specified for a specific type. I think I'll just leave it there, because I think I'm out of time. Yeah. That's it, to be honest. That was it. So great.
So what we'll probably do is, if we get some questions at the end when we've gone through the presentations, if that's okay.
Yes, that's right? Fine. No bother. And of course I'll be here in the break as well. So
yeah, exactly. You can go through it. Right, so in terms of the, many of you will be aware of the programme we've got at the moment, this on kind of digital exemplars and the wider digital programme. A key driver that we have for this is around online consultation, and we went through a procurement exercise on online consultation as part of the GP Forward View, and the area secured a certain amount of funding. We went with the support of the central procurement team at NHS England. We went through a procurement exercise, and Plato was chosen as the provider of the pre-GP app to allow us to do online consultation. In Fold and Wire and Morecambe Bay, you're likely to already know about iPlato because they're already working in those areas, but for those in the rest of across the STP, it's probably quite new to you. So we've asked Kieran if you wouldn't mind coming along just to explain what it is, because Will, as the team, will be starting to talk to you about this as a product, and it's just to give you an understanding of what it can actually do. So it's up to you.
Cool. Okay, so I'm Kieran now from iPlato. As we were saying, there's quite a wide range of people here, so either you're already using iPlato and the app that goes with it, or you've never heard of us until about 5 minutes ago when somebody just mentioned us. So I'm going to kind of go through those. Now, to give you an idea of who iPlato are, we are actually dealing with quite a lot of patients already. We've already got quite a lot of practices. We do the CCGs, trusts, community, so basically anything in healthcare, iPlato's already in that area. I've got quite a few slides because I think it's important for you to actually see how the app works and how things fit together. But in essence, we've got iPlato that links through to EMIS Web. The patient downloads the app, they register to use the app, they can book and cancel appointments, they can enter in symptoms and queries, and then what we're calling pre-GP is the online consultation piece. So again, it gets confusing with the terminology, but if you hear online consultation from iPlato, it is actually pre-GP, and that's the smart triaging element. So again, you'll understand that as we go through. And then the box at the end that's in the dark blue is the digital consultation and video type element. So again, it's a journey. We're not saying that every practice wants to do everything from tomorrow. There'll be practices that don't even do anything online. They're struggling to get patients. So it's a journey, depending on what stage you're at. So again, Fold and Wire, practices are already using the app there. So for them, they just want to get onto the pre-GP section. So again, typical slide of what practices are struggling with, the issues that they've got, waiting times, can't get appointments, phones are too busy. So again, that's what we're trying to address. But how it works and how do patients get the app, it's important to understand. It's quite easy. Practice manager, do I really want to be seeing any more patients than I do now? Probably not. I just want them to sort themselves out. So what we do is we just send a link to the patients via text. Now, you can use any mechanism. If you're already using NJOG, you can do that. If you use iPlato, we can do that. Or you can use your own system. You send that link to the patient and away they go. That link now allows them to get onto the app straight away without any involvement from the practice. We've split out the two actions. So again, it's great getting them in, DNA swabs, blood test, to actually see the patient who it is and give them access to the online activities. But actually, to book and cancel appointments and communicate with the practice, you've already got those details. So we do the onboarding part of the process as part of it. To show you what it looks like, first screen, we're going to have GDPR bingo. I agree to terms. So a lot of people have already been here an hour and I've had 3 inquiries about GDPR. Patients using this app, as soon as they open it up, nobody will read it, but when they click agree to terms and conditions, that's explicit consent. So actually, you're capturing it at the very beginning, so you don't need to worry about GDPR with the app. Once they're in, they type in the phone number and the date of birth, and because we're connected to EMIS in the practice, we know who the patient is, and we'll send them a text straight away so that we know it's that patient. So it's like online banking. We've all got mortgages, bank accounts. I've never seen anybody at the bank. So we're following the same process. You type the code in, and it says, welcome Kieran, you're at such and such a practice. So that is a registered patient for our service, and that's full access straight away without anything. So there's no need for them to come into the practice to get letters or anything like that. While they're there, it'd be useful to capture some information. So the first screen the patient sees before they can get anywhere, are you a smoker? So no matter what they choose, we recode it directly back to the medical record, so that's captured straight away. And for the smokers, I want to tell them something special. So I've set the system up, so as soon as they click yes, it fires them a little message that says there's a smoking clinic on a Wednesday, here are the directions and what we do. As soon as they've got the app on the phone, they get a little box that says they've received a message. So again, if you're familiar with WhatsApp, those types of things, if you're an app person, you'll get it, so you understand it. If you're like my dad that's 74, he won't even be on that. He's just got an old NAF phone that doesn't do anything. So he can still do the normal texting and online services. I can send different messages. So here, there's an example message that says, Kieran, you're eligible for health check. Now, we don't put health check appointments on online, because if you were like my dad, he'd book it, he'd book the smear, if it's there, he'll click on it. So what we've done is we put a link in so that they can see it. So again, I put NHS choices. It could be the local practice website, could be the CCG website, could be Domino's Pizza. Whatever you want to put on there and send it to the patient, you can do it, because the link's within the app. Underneath it, asks them if they want to decline and if they don't want to do it. Those appointments can be hidden. So only the patients that are in that recall could see those options. So again, most patients log on, they see every appointment. With this, it's specific to the recall group. So if you've texted 100 patients and messaged 100 patients that they're eligible for a health check, well, the ones that are using the app, they could see hidden appointments. Patients can book and cancel appointments using proxy access, so that's already working. So if I've had a practice that's using iPlato in File and Wire, and there's a practice in Blackpool using it, and my auntie's there, I can add them in. So there's me, and I've got my 2 children. We can send a message through so that they get access. I won't dwell on the age groups 12 to 16 IG. We tick those boxes, and it's up to you to give access to whoever you want. If they're over 16, it's the user themselves that gives access. So it sends that message to them. And at the end, you can see that's me, Homer Simpson, with the 2 kids. So depending on who you click on, you can then book directly into their practice. So currently, I think I've got Lynn's practice in Sedbergh set up, and I can click on Lynn, and it shows me Lynn's practice with all of her appointments. But actually, when I go back to my page, it shows me my appointments. Medication reminders, weight, BP, and monitoring. This is purely for the patient at this stage, so it's very static, and it's staying there for the patients to be able to use it. Although we have commenced a project to get that information either into a portal view or direct to record. Because clearly, if that was applicable in a care home, nursing home, other areas, that would be really useful then for somebody to be able to see it, new scores, O2, pulse, resting rate. So, how do patients book appointments? So what we're looking at now is the pre-GP functionality of how it works. So the patient goes in, they click on book appointment, and it's connected to the clinical system. Oh, skipped along a bit. There we go. It's a couple of clicks to set it up. I don't want to be setting stuff up in EMIS, so what we do is we read what's in EMIS. You want to offer that online, and you can put asthma clinic. If you want to trick the patient, you could call it something else, and they won't know because the buttons are the same. So you can change the way that it looks to the patient. They pop in the reason. So in here, this patient's had a rash on their arm for over a week, and they want to see the GP, so they go to click book appointment. Once that information's gathered, it then goes into EMIS. So again, if you're looking at your clinical setup in EMIS appointment book, that's what it would look like for your appointment book. The information's sat there waiting. Care navigation then switches on. And what we're trying to do is, although the patient's got an appointment booked in 2 weeks' time, because that's the closest GP appointment they've got, again, I'll use my dad as an example, doesn't enter his head to see anybody else. He will immediately want to see a GP. With our system, what we're trying to do is get them off at the different points along this line to do something else. So they can either go to the pharmacy and use pharmacy first if that's available. They can either educate themselves, they can have a telephone appointment, they could see a nurse. And if they're adamant, they can still see a GP. So we're quite different in that respect, that we're not stopping the patient. Because the thing is, if we tried to stop them booking a GP appointment, they'd find a way around it. They'd be stood at the door at 8 o'clock in the morning. They'd be ringing up, unless you're taking your appointments off EMIS online. And again, they sit together. The last thing, the second phase for the digital consultation that we mentioned earlier, that's starting over summer. So that's where it'll fall into things like video consultation and enhanced data capture. Because in an ideal world, if somebody's clicking med review, should they not be filling in maybe a few questions as part of that booking process? Should it not be sat in EMIS for me to look at it and assess it? If it was a minor surgery, should it not be a photograph of what they're having done so that they can look at it before the clinic? So those types of things are going to come through as well. How it works at the moment, patient goes on to book an appointment and they're presented with different options. So in this instance, the patient's put in a new concern or a new problem, and then they put in the reasons why they want to visit. Once they pop the information in, they're then presented with a second screen. So here we're saying, well, okay, you've got a GP appointment in 2.5 weeks' time, but if you want, you could book this alternative appointment, which is a telephone appointment, and that's maybe only 2 weeks away. They could view other telephones, so we're trying to switch them to alternatives. If they want, they can switch to that, and it'll like ask them to cancel the appointment so they get rid of the GP appointment. We're trying to put them off, so actually we're going to show them nurse appointments next. So again, I've configured this purely for my practice. You could do it at CCG, networks, CCG level, it's up to you how you design it. But I'm saying actually, these are the things that my nurses do. Actually, yeah, it's the blood pressure check that I want. So I booked the GP appointment, well actually forget it, I'll change to the nurse, and the nurse appointment could only be a week away. So we're giving them alternatives throughout the process. And again, how you match them up into your appointment book is entirely up to you. Final chance to try and stop them booking the GP appointment. Yeah. So we've put on services. So again, current experience with my father, GP appointment, I didn't know because of where he is in East Lancashire. There's a self-referral spine clinic. He's been waiting for a GP appointment. We literally turned up to see them. If I'd have had this functionality and saw spine clinic, self-referral, click here, call, he wouldn't have gone to the GP, he wouldn't have seen the GP. So here, this is where you can promote services that are your practice specific, or CCG. Again, it's up to you how you design that, but it's up to you what you want to put on there. And again, if you've got, I know that some areas are looking at directory of services and maintaining it themselves, you could actually say, well, Blackpool Directory Service, click here, and it's a website that lists everything. Some areas have pharmacy first, some areas have got dispensing sites. So again, you can switch these screens off, so if you didn't want the pharmacy one, or if you were a dispensing practice, you could switch that off. But here, pharmacy screen, well actually, you're booking a GP appointment, would you not rather go to the chemist, because they're dealing with all of these things here. And again, I know that some areas have got pharmacy med reviews being done at the chemist, so they'll direct them there. The patient can click find pharmacy, and then it'll bring up a map. Pharmacists around them, show them which ones are open. Because the app's in the hand, we're starting to get information from them. The last example I'll show you is sick note as another example. A lot of patients just book a sick note appointment. They don't actually even know you don't need one for 7 days. So what we notice is a lot click cancel, and they may come back in a few days. We're not saying it will stop it, but providing the information that they don't actually need a sick note for 7 days. Not many people know that. Contact details. By all means, write those down. I can provide you with any information after today. I'm here for the most of the day as well. If you want to give me a phone call, email, I can send information through. Yeah.
Okay, so again, what we'll do is at the end of the presentations, we'll open it up and we'll have about 10 minutes talk or questions.
No, no, it's fine.
Right, in terms of what this presentation is, this relates to, we've been having some discussions through the digital endeavour programme around different products that some practices are using and actually using quite effectively. We wanted to explore ways that we could showcase some of that work, but also offer that to other practices across the exemplar programmes as well. So we invited a guy here from Niche Health to talk about the IGPR software and also around how it works around with showing patient records and things like that as well. So over to you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Mark. As Mark just said, I've really come along. I don't know how many of you use IGPR, have come across IGPR. As you're all EMIS practices, it's something that was deployed to the entire EMIS web user base initially about 3 years ago. And when we developed it, really it was very much focused around trying to make the process of providing medical evidence to third parties more secure and ultimately a quicker process, so to cut down on the time involved in doing that, but also ensure that only the information that's supposed to be sent to the requesting third parties is sent to them. But what it's actually done is it's grown sort of almost organically to do a number of things in the same sort of space, which we'll go on and talk about. So in terms of what that covers, we've got insurance reporting, really sort of a lot of the work that's done by practices around third parties and requests for medical evidences for insurance purposes. We've then got solicitors, so you're getting lots of requests for things like subject access requests, which we'll come on and talk about in relation to GDPR and how that's changed recently, or is about to change on the 25th of May. And then the last aspect is really sort of the patient online toolkit. So we've worked directly with the patient online team, as Kay pointed out, to develop effectively a screening function within the system to check records before you make them available, or not, as the case may be, to patients. So I don't have a whole host of slides. Really, I've got slide envy with everybody else in the room, got a lot of slides, but I've gone with one slide and just sort of walk through what it does. Quite happy to, as Mark said, take questions at the end. Normally the presentation will involve me sort of showing you the product, but I think given how much time we've got, we're really outside, so if you wanted to come and have a look at what it does, how it works, but just sort of, for now, we'll just talk through what it's all about, really. So, from an insurance perspective, it's about end-to-end processing. So the insurers that are enabled for IGPR have the ability to send a request to your practice on behalf of a patient, which will automatically allow you to then process the request through the software. Ultimately, the insurer should only receive the relevant and necessary information. So what's happened historically, they've asked for a range of things. All of the insurers ask for different sort of reports and different sort of aspects of a patient's record, but ultimately this controls that, so it's able to define and control what goes back. The key thing about the product is that it has this underlying redaction engine, so the purpose is to actually ensure that information that sits in the record that shouldn't go back doesn't go back. So in the case of insurance reporting, there are around about, we work with the BMA and the ABR, and there are around about 1,000 codes and about 2,500 words and phrases that are redacted when you produce a report automatically. So, you know, the sort of things that you would expect, HIV negative testing, all of that sort of information, predictive genetic testing, should automatically come out of the report before it's returned, which the system does. It analyses, and this is true across all three functions, it analyses the codes, the free text, and the attachments. Okay, so it will actually look at the letters as well for you and redact information out of the letters rather than having to leaf through, you know, what could be hundreds of pieces of paper. It will do that automatically. The key part of the process is ultimately the audit. So a GDPR, being able to evidence what you've sent, what's been taken out of the reporting before you send it is absolutely critical. So there's an underlying audit report that's produced with every report that you create for an insurer, and ultimately that's filed back into the clinical record. So you hold an audit piece in the record, but also the report itself, if you wish to, and the audit report. Basically, sort of moving along. Then looking at sort of solicitors' reports, one of the things that's changed or will change under GDPR is that you are no longer able to charge for a subject access request anymore. So historically you've been able to charge up to £50 to produce it and then provide that to the requesting party. That's been removed, and so one of the things that we found, we've got now thousands of practices using the product, but ultimately what we found, certainly in the recent months, is that this concern around the amount of work that's involved and how that's done manually at the moment is something that's realistically not something that they can continue to do. So this will do that electronically. So again, it will generate a subject access or a full copy notes, as some practices refer to them, and it will then analyse the record to ensure that in this instance it removes primarily references to third parties, so it will go through and remove those third party references for you. The system, again across the board, will actually allow you to create your own dictionaries, so you can actually, through phrases and words or particular things that you don't want to include within a report over and above the standard sets, you can simply add them to your own dictionaries basically, and it will redact those for you. And again, coming back, it's very much about audit, so being, again, very much when you're producing a full set of copy notes, being able to show what you've done, when you did it, what you took out, and ultimately, as it says, you can then choose whether you want to redact further information from the reports that you might deem as sensitive or harmful, should it be passed over to the third party. Okay. Third aspect is that of patient online. So the process prior to having maybe an electronic screening function, but most practices a patient will present, they will fill in the consent forms asking for access to their record. That could be the detail coded record, it may be free text. I think most practices are really only offering detail coded record. Whether Kay would confirm that or not, but generally if you're offering access to the medical record it's detail coded, but ultimately there's a drive to be able to provide access to free text and ultimately letters which will give them the whole picture of what's going on. The tool itself is really designed to take away that manual process of screening. So someone's come in, they've asked for access to the record, that request will go into a clinician to actually generally sit down and look through the record and determine, is there anything in there that you wouldn't necessarily want to permit? Are they competent to have those aspects of the record that you might feel uncomfortable, that would be harmful? Examples we've seen, your patients that were adopted at birth, it's in the record, they didn't know that, they've been given access. It's just a very simple example of them becoming aware of something that could be harmful to them, could be unsettling, etc., etc. So it's those types of things that we've looked at. Working with NHS England, again, there's around about 900 codes and about 2,500-3,000 words and phrases that you would potentially find in a record that cover aspects of mental health, all those types of things, domestic violence, anything that you might find in the record that you would want to be aware of before giving a patient access, or actually you're bringing the patient into the practice to talk to them about some of the things that are in the record that might be of concern that you want to make them aware of before you give them access to the record. Because obviously with EMIS you have got the ability to hide certain elements to actually from patient online access, and that's really what this does. It's about supporting that. Obviously the guidance from the Royal College and NHS England is very much that each record should be screened, but I think why we were approached by NHS England is it's acknowledged that to screen a record is quite a significant thing. There's a lot of data to go through, and if you're doing that manually, I think the test sort of showed it's anywhere between 20 and 40 minutes manually, whereas this takes literally 2 clicks, and as long as it takes to go through the record, which is usually sort of about 30 seconds to a minute, depending on whether you're analysing the actual attachments. But really that's what it's about. We wanted to sort of come along and just do a brief presentation. As I say, we can sort of demonstrate how the product works, what it does. But it's really about sort of supporting practices, with compliance, meeting GDPR requirements, ensuring that, data that shouldn't be shared isn't shared, depending on who's asking it and what the need is really. So that's it.
And so at 2 o'clock we've got a break, and I would sort of suggest that you would the copy that will be in there. If you go along to Guy and Lee as well, and just have a different view of demo of what the product does and that as well, so it's quite useful to you.
I'm doing on this thing because I'm rubbish.
Just the arrow there.
Yeah.
So it changes it if you need to go back that one, but I'm only there, so if you...
I'm absolutely dreadful with technology. There you go. Down here.
Right, so just the final presentation now. Really what this is about is really the exemplary programme, as I mentioned before, isn't just about the online consultation element. It's around using all different types of digital, and one of the offers that we do give to you is if you wanted to do anything around social media, we can provide you with social media workshops for your staff on how to use it effectively within your practice. So again, if that's something that interests you, come to myself or members of the team and we can book a workshop in your area. In the course of that, we have seen some really good examples of practices that are already doing it. So my colleague Paul had a meeting with the one, and They talked about how they've been using Facebook with their PPG. So we've invited them just to come and explain that. And like I said, we'll have some questions, and at 2 o'clock we can have questions in the group. Okay?
Yeah. Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. I feel that I'm following a lot of experts, and I'm really not an expert. I am a practice manager who's sort of jack of all trades, I guess you could say. At our surgery in Adelaide Street, which is in Blackpool, we decided to start a virtual PPG. How it began is we realised we did have quite a healthy PPG who were engaging in our face-to-face meetings, but they were all of one type of people. We tended to have all the white British people who are relatively healthy and retired, and I found that right across the board that tends to be the case with most face-to-face PPGs. We wanted a bit of a more diverse group. We wanted to know what our other patients actually felt about the surgery. We're in the middle at the moment of merging, we're in the middle of building a new build, and I wanted to gather information from all of our patients on what they wanted to know, what they were interested in, and what their thoughts were on everything. So we needed to reach more people. We needed to get help. Frankly, I had no clue on how to run anything like this. We did have a very successful Facebook page. We've probably got sort of 200 people that roughly come onto our Facebook page on quite a regular basis and comment and upload various things, and generally good comments. I don't think I've had too much bad stuff to answer, so we felt that we were actually doing okay with that. But we wanted to attract more people in to get this whole PPG running as a closed PPG group. I went to Ben Greenwood, who works for the CSU, and he came in just to talk to us about our Facebook page and if we could do anything to improve that, and he was pretty happy with that. So he decided that we should have the birth, as he put it, of the virtual PPG, and he would help us set that up and work with that. So we started by advertising. We advertised on our Facebook page, our website, in the surgery. We made some posters that we put up, and I basically got all my reception staff talking, chatting to the patients and asking them if they were interested in joining along with this, because it was something that they didn't have to turn up to. They could sit in their lounge and press a button and ask questions. So we did plan our first meeting. Now, I know there are a few virtual groups that have gone on in the country, but what I was told, I was actually advised to do it as a separate group, and I chose not to. I felt that if I went to my face-to-face group and said I've got a different group of people and you're not necessarily part of that, they would be upset. So I wanted to do a joint meeting side by side so that we could gather the comments from the people sat in front of me and the comments from people that were at home, work, wherever else they were commenting from, and bring them together so we could all talk and discuss within one meeting exactly what was going on with the practice. This is Adam. Adam is my sort of, he's part of my admin group, but he's also the greatest help for me with this, because I couldn't possibly talk to everyone face to face whilst typing without appearing rude and not really engaging with things. So as I was talking to the face-to-face PPG, he would then be typing up everything I said. They would then be coming back and answering questions, and he would then read out their responses to my face-to-face group, who would then comment back. He can multitask, thankfully, so he's assisted a lot with that. So as I said, we updated the group, and this also gave a chance for our doctors and some of my staff to get involved. I've got staff that wouldn't want to spend their evening sat at a PPG group when they've worked all day. But again, they started to make a few comments, and I think mainly people were really pleased to see doctors on there who were actually giving them the answers they wanted. I think the only issues we've had, a few people asking personal medical questions, which we've had to put a stop to. Can't have that all over Facebook. We have also had people that have crossed the slight line and thought that perhaps they could start sending personal Facebook requests to members of staff because we were all friends now. But that's probably been the only downside of everything, and that's been sorted out pretty quickly. In the first one we had 67 comments, which I didn't think was too bad for a first attempt. It's probably about 15 people that actually came on board and signed up that day. We then got published an article in Management in Practice about the virtual PPG, which I felt then would encourage other people to maybe do that, and I have had people who have then found me from practices on NHSnet and sent me an email and asked me how we went about this, so I felt I have helped to encourage other groups to work with this. Well, it says next meeting planned. It was actually last night. We held our second virtual PPG group last night alongside our face-to-face group. It did go very well. We have had 3 new members this week, and I didn't have it in time for this, as it happened last night, but I wrote down the final comment, which shows that this is working to me, because this was a young man who none of us knew, wasn't recognisable to any of us because he was probably quite healthy, so he didn't actually come to surgery. And he had put, "Thank you all, this has been really good. I normally only experience the practice just attending the occasional appointment. This has been a really great experience." So I felt that that's made it all worthwhile, that people are actually getting on board with this and really enjoying sort of being able to be part of things without actually turning up. Thank you.
So we've got about sort of 10-15 minutes. I wondered if we could do some questions, some colleagues can help. In terms of the speakers, do you want to go to the front? Let's go back in.
To launch a physical and a virtual group, sort of a relaunch. Your Facebook page, do you have a practice Facebook page? Do you have a separate PPG Facebook page?
Yes, we've got a closed group because we just didn't want anyone and everyone looking at it and commenting on the night, and we felt that made them actually engage properly. So it's I advertise it on our practice page, but yeah, it's a closed group. I can, if you've got my details, I think, so you get in touch with me and I'll help you if there's anything I can do to help.
Do you check them on emails before you?
To make sure there are patients. We do have a look, but we do get sometimes people that will tell us that there's another, I mean, we've got someone that's joined, like I think someone from the CCG joined, which we allowed because obviously there was a reason, but no, we don't just let random people join, we do have a look. Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Any other questions?
So when you're streaming it, did you just stream it through Facebook Live?
No, it's basically done almost like comments. We're not doing a live, there's no video. Not yet. I haven't quite got that far because I felt I didn't know how the face-to-face group were going to react. I'd have to have permission from all of them if we start videoing them. So we've done it where someone literally types everything and then we work on the comments from that, and I found that a lot easier. I didn't want to start videoing me at this point. I wasn't quite ready for that.
Does anybody know if NHS England are going to release any guidance around talking to patients via Facebook? Because we had a virtual PPG and the chairman was really positive about it, and we had the issue where he then friend requested some of the staff. They were fine with that because they level it out at like an acquaintance level. There was nothing, neither party found that to be a problem. But when we had our CQC inspection, they really frowned on it. And we were...
Right, so there is quite a bit of guidance out there in terms of using social media. I can circulate that. I mean, one of the things we want to, maybe as part of your roundtable discussions, is the information we have and the toolkits we have, how do we make those available to you rather than bombard you with emails? Is there somewhere we can put them that you can access them as and when you need them? So I've had separate discussions where I've been involved with CQC around social media and things like that, and there are some quite clear guidance that enable you on the government's process in terms of enabling you to actually use that. Because I think when I certainly met with CQC, there was an understanding from their point that kind of the genie's out the bottom with a lot of this. If you're going to engage with patients and they have to be on Facebook, they say, well, we're not doing it for X, Y, Z reasons, cuts off quite a large portion.
You have people who like to determine your PPG and you are not accepting it as a Facebook friend, when you can actually control the
so there's some clear guidance on that.
It does make me feel like, oh right, so you want me to engage free and you offer my opinion and volunteer for things, but you're not prepared. It caused a lot of difficulties for us, because afterwards we had to go and say, they frowned on it, no, but if you have something as a closed group where you can put in some rules or something forward to say, these are the terms of this.
Yeah, that's basically what we've done. We've got it as a closed group, and when I did have one person that was a bit persistent, I just explained it would be really inappropriate, because then it could be looked at as sort of favouritism if a patient was a friend of a member of staff and it wasn't appropriate, and he was absolutely fine with that. He was actually deaf, and I think on another side of things this was great for him, because he didn't want to attend anything face to face because he was a little conscious, so it was really good. But then that, as you say, he was up.
It's just you might have receptionists who live in the area who have patients that are friends who are naturally their friends. So it just raised loads of issues for us. We were like, well, how do we control this? You can't have a blanket rule when, and it hadn't been an issue from a practice perspective or a patient perspective, but just a CQC one.
So I think again, the reason why we run workshops with practice is if you're on Facebook in your personal capacity, it's very easy to search for somebody on Facebook. So you're likely, because you're at the, if your name is appearing on your website, because you're likely to end up with people searching for you anyway. So part of what we offer is that we just show you, if you're using Facebook, there are some simple things you can do to lock down your security settings, which you should always be doing anyway. But you'd be surprised that people don't do that when they sign up to things like that. So that if you are interested in those sorts of workshops, we're quite happy to run one for your practice, or certainly in the area as well. That's part of the support that's offered. So we've got any other questions, perhaps for Kieran or Guy or others?
Medication reviews and patients' BP results and weight. Is that coming in from EAMS? Or is that what they've put on themselves?
No, so currently it's what the patient would, so again, believe it or not, I record my steps, clearly it's not working, but the patient records stuff on the phone. So it's purely for that, because really what we're saying is if they use the app more likely to use it. You know, the situation we've probably got now is they probably don't use the app that they're on. When they go on it, they can't remember the login details, so really we're trying to get them to use it more. So currently it doesn't go anywhere, but we have just started a piece of work with a couple of CCGs so that it would be visible to the practice. So again, can't give any more details on that yet. Literally started last week.
It's just that it would be handy if it didn't went through some medication reviews.
And that's exactly why we started that piece. I'll be able to update you when that's been forward. We're looking at the end of the year for that.
Right, so there was a question at the back.
Sorry, just me. For the iPlato trap, sorry, I put you in. The iPlato app, is that an app, and is it available only on the Android and the Apple OS? What about those patients who don't have those devices? How do they get access to that?
So as it currently stands, our app is only app based on a smartphone, and it's only on Android or Apple. Now the reason that it's that way is because currently we split it out from online patient-facing services, medical record prescriptions to just appointment access. Probably 80% of the practice have on a mobile phone and probably use that. So we're trying to target the majority. We realise it's not going to tick the box for everybody. It is on the roadmap, but again, it's not that high up the list at the moment. That might fall into the GP stock work we're doing. So again, currently you can order prescriptions through EAMS, Evergreen, Dynamic. That will be available on the app as well shortly. So again, it's a journey, as it were. So online access via a web portal on the roadmap.
Not related to my question I was going to ask about when potentially stop patients issues.
Yeah.
People don't realise they have to register for patient access.
It's happening now. I mean, even though we're not on that list at the moment, it's already happening with Evergreen, Patient Access and Dynac, which are already on that list. In theory, it's patient's choice. They can do whatever they want, but clearly we'll be on that list. So that, in theory, if you want to work prescriptions from some of that, but we will switch.
Any other questions?
Can I ask you, as a bunch, a bit more about video consultations? Because I do a lot, because my health is not very good, and I'm thinking about a lot of other people in East Lancs where GPs are actually getting too old, but might be able to carry on working and contributing if they don't have to travel around as much. So I do whole remote telephone surgeries, which is obviously limited in terms of not being able to see the thing. Do you know anyone who is actually doing surgeries like that remotely using video consultations? And if so, what's the best way of doing that?
Right, so I'll just answer part of that, and then I'll go over to Andrew and Mohammed at the back there, who actually this their programme as well, so it'll be quite useful that they are here. So just in terms of what we want out of this whole programme is to, as we're working with all of the digital dental practices, is you're all going to come with different ambitions. Some are going to be saying they really want to push the online consultation more than anything else. We're getting quite a few that want to do the social media element. Some want to do some really creative work around getting patients online in general. We have actually had quite a few who've been coming forward already saying they want to do video. So I've got experience of using video to care homes and how that works. I think the video to patients maybe with long-term conditions is something that we can certainly explore. But perhaps in terms of from an infrastructure perspective, maybe Andrew or Mohammed in that.
Yeah, so from a primary care perspective, there's been a lot of work on video consultation in Cumbria and Lancashire. We're going to be working as part of this piece of work with the exemplars on use cases for video solutions. If you take the technology out of the equation, we've got all the solutions there available for anybody to use. We need to work with you now on the use cases for video technology in primary care. Like I said, we can point people in directions to the work that's being done on Care Home Connect and things in Blackpool Fowl and Wire and stuff that we're doing on virtual consultation. But we need to get into those conversations now about how we use it. We're there ready to go whenever questions are mature.
So the simple answer is yes, we do. And I think the point about the workforce is really well made, very easily implemented for all different types of frontline staff. We should be doing it. There's going to be people who, for all sorts of reasons, can't come into the space, and there will be patients who are quite happy to do this. So we need to help with. So absolutely support that. Mark says.
Sorry, I didn't introduce you. I'm Andrew Thompson. I manage the shared insurance services. We manage a lot of the underlying protection networks I think around the region. We know so all the Declan using digital health for STP.
Okay, any other questions before we have a break? I don't know if Mike, if you want to explain the tabletop exercise before we go.
Yeah, probably better, I think. Well, I'm not walking too complicated. You don't really hear me back in. I'll see you. After the break, we'll have some coffee and have about 20 minutes or so to have a natter. But it's then open to you lot to sort of provide Mark and I and others with the information that we need to be able to offer the right support for you going forward as digital exemplars. There is a slide somewhere that's going to come on the table.
We'll put that up when we start.
We'll put it up after the break, with some questions of what we want to get out of this next session. If you sat down for about 35 or 40 minutes at the very most, we assure you we're left at 3 o'clock. But when we come back into groups after break, we're trying to get onto tables of between 6 and 8, so no less than 6, no more than 8. Let's try and encourage you to mix up, so work with other PCNs other than your own, or other practices other than your own. And if we can try to get a balance of clinicians and admin and management with on the tables, that will be really helpful. There's tables outside as well, so don't feel we have to confine ourselves to this area. There's more tables than facilitators, so on each table if you have a list of questions that
basically looking at what are the main objectives, what are your goals for becoming a digital exemplar. As PCNs, as practices, you've all applied and requested that you're a digital exemplar. So we want to know why and what you hope to get out of this programme. What sort of good would end up looking for. And what we're trying to get out of that question, and the facilitators will prompt you, we're trying to get to sort of 3 to 5 objectives really about what we can actually measure, what success would look like. So what should we be measuring? Whether that's about savings, whether it's about time pressures, whether it's about getting more people online, whether it's about access to other forms of digital. We'll talk through that. We'd then like to know what you will get out of this. So what sort of support do you need? What type of tools do you want to access? You've heard of some of the tools mentioned today. We've just touched on video conferencing, which is coming up more and more at various. What sort of tools, what sort of support could Reservoir and others provide to you for the PCA? And then we want to know how we're going to actually measure success. So we'll, in those objectives, we'll say, well, we want to, I don't know, whatever it might be, save some money here, or want to save some time, want to save policies, want to save DNA. All of those things that we're asking within our objective require somebody to gather the data, or somebody to support the data gathering, so that we can measure at the end of phase 1, at the end of phase 2, how successful we've been as PCNs. So we need you to be realistic about what you're asking us to go out and measure, and somebody will come in and do support with some independent evaluation. The final question is about a digital exemplar network, and we're hearing more and more from PCNs that they want to be able to network in order to show good practice, in order to be able to have areas of interest, so there's specific practices or groups of PCNs that are interested in video conferencing. Can we bring those together? So what should that sort of digital network look like? Should it be virtual? Should it be sort of learning set? So if we're all interested in one particular area, then we'll group those and let's go through a process together. So there'll be some questions around that, what that should look like. And then about 10 to 3, we're going to draw that session to a close. There'll be a little bit of feedback, not necessarily on what we've written down, just on the day in general. At 3 o'clock you'll be free to leave. Don't run off now when you're having coffee. I know I've sat at too many of these events, I've put some posters on the stairs. Don't be getting there. Go and have a coffee, go and have a chat to these people. And we'll see you back.